panpsychism? Is it just nonsense in your view? Is there plausibly something to it? There seem to be very strong feelings on many sides related to this. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on the matter?
Yeah, so I mean the quantum thing, I mean the best people, I think would be Penrose and Hameroff, people like that.
Yep.
I think you face, I mean, I think it's undeniable. We have empirical evidence that there's quantum stuff going on in smell. I think that's undeniable. Is there quantum stuff going on in the kind of consciousness that is overlapping with attention and working memory and intelligence? No, because you show all kinds of limitations that are clear evidence that you are operating like a classical machine, like all the biases I talked about and all the ways you ignore all kinds of information, blah, 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 blah. And you also have you have problems about temperature and you have problems. So I think those people give the best representation. I'm giving you why I'm not convinced by that. I think the evidence against it is significantly greater than any evidence for it. And like you, I don't like the argument that goes, consciousness is weird, quantum is weird, therefore consciousness is quantum. Like that's just ridiculous. Yeah, right. Now, panpsychism is a different thing, and you don't have to be convinced about quantum stuff to be, a panpsychist.
Totally.
Right. And so,
would you mind? I should have defined my terms, but would you mind just giving people an overview of what panpsychism is?
Panpsychism is a version of what's called, well, I would argue it's a version of what's called elemental property dualism.
Yep.
And so the idea here is we have fundamental building blocks of our ontology: space, time, force, matter, energy, and we may move those around, but right, that's not important right now. And we don't try and explain them. We use them to explain other things because they're fundamental. And like I say, physics, some people are arguing we may reject time and space as fundamental and move to something deeper. I don't know. But that's not relevant to the core of the argument. The core of argument is that consciousness is like that. Consciousness is a fundamental ontological building block. And therefore, the attempt to explain it with any of the other fundamental building blocks is impossible. You can't do it because they are at the same ontology, meaning the structure of reality. They are at the same ontological level. They're the basement level in terms of which you explain everything else. So you can't, the attempt to try and explain them is a misframing of the kind of thing they are. And so that means if consciousness is such a fundamental ontological building block, like, space, time, energy, force, right? And energy and matter are convertible, Einstein, right? You find them, there is no part of reality where even empty space, right, has got all of these fundamental ontological building blocks. And if consciousness is such a fundamental building block, it is also showing up in everything. So my table has consciousness, not my full-blown consciousness, but it has what it's like to be a table. Mm-hmm. Like my consciousness is about perspectival knowing, right? And so it has what it's like to be a table. It has an inner subjective experiential aspect. Now, not full-blown like mine. Nobody's ridiculous in claiming there's some sort of consciousness like mine somehow trapped in this table, unable to speak or something like that. So we have no evidence for that. But the idea is that there are aspects of what it is to be a table that are what it's like to be a table for the table and not for me or for you. And that would be what the claim of panpsychism is. The person who best makes it plausible to my mind, while not necessarily agreeing it, is a colleague of mine, Bill Seeger. He's made a very strong case for the plausibility of panpsychism. Now, I reject panpsychism, although I accept things that come close to it in some important ways.
What do you reject and what do you accept?
I don't think that there's anything like perspectival knowing going on at the level of the table, but I'm confident enough about my ignorance of consciousness and reality to not say I'm sure and slam on this table. I do think, and this is work of Evan Thompson and others in 4 Ecogs High, I think and Michael Levin, I think there's a deep continuity. I think, meaning the principles of consciousness have a deep continuity with the principles of cognition, which have a deep continuity with the principles of life, which have a deep continuity with the principles of self-organization, which have a deep continuity with some of the fundamental ways in which reality unfolds for us. And so they're not identical. You can't simply reduce the upper level to the lower levels, but there are shared principles all the way through. And I think the evidence for a deep continuity hypothesis is very good, and the arguments are very important. So I do think, for example, it's proper to say that there is a rudimentary cognition for a paramecium. It's a cognitive agent. It's detecting the sugar molecule as food and this other molecule as poison. It's a little bit of an aspect, a little bit of a perspective, and it allows it to care about this rather than that. Now, is that what you and I have? No, something like that. Does that extend below living things? I don't think so, because self-organizing things like the fire don't seem to direct their behavior to preserve their own existence the way living things do. And I think that's a fundamental difference in how things are organized and how they function. So I don't think consciousness and cognition or agency drop below the level of living things.